We know Alice Fairs as a wife and a mother. We hardly know of her as being among the first women to nudge at the glass ceiling and excel as what we often patronizingly refer to as a working woman in Pakistan. She fell in love with Fairs in Amritsar, India. Their mutual love of Shakespeare brought them together.
छोटी सी बारात थी, तीन आदमी थे, एक तो फैज साहब and his younger brother Inayat and a political friend. They arrived in the evening, tired and dusty. तो पहले मैंने फैज से पूछा था, आप अंगूठी लेके आए हैं? तो क्या ज़रूर लेके आया हूँ। मैंने कहा तुम्हारे पास पैसे कहाँ थे? तुम्हारे पास पैसे भी नहीं थे। तो कहने लगे मैंने इफ्तिखारुद्दीन से कर्ज लिया था, खैर वापस तो देना नहीं मैंने। तो मैंने कहा साइज़ का पता था? कहने लगी हाँ तुम्हारी जैसी। तो मैंने ट्राई किया था, नहीं मैंने ट्राई नहीं किया। मैंने कहा नो दैट्स बैड लक टू ट्राई बिफोर द मैरिज। तो आई डिडंट ट्राई द रिंग। शाम को दावत हुई थी, बहुत बड़ी दावत हुई थी और इसलिए कि बहुत से शायर लोग आए हुए थे, एक मुशायरा भी हुआ था।
Her commitment to Fairs made her move to Pakistan, a place she adopted as her home. Her love for Fairs was put through a trying time when he was put behind bars in 1951. Not only did she become his rock, emotionally, she also became his patron.
बहुत देर की बात है, लेकिन ऐसे मालूम होता कि कल की बात थी। सुबह के वक्त था, कोई 5 बजे, और कुछ आवाज़ आई थी नीचे से। तो मैं उठी थी, हम ऊपर वाले फ्लैट में रहते थे ना। So I got up and I looked over the veranda and there I saw about 50 armed policemen. तो मैंने फैज से कह दिया ये कोई रेड हो रहा है, किस लिए? तो उन्होंने कहा मुझे नहीं पता। उस ज़माने में 1951 पंजाब के इलेक्शंस हो रहे थे, तो उन्होंने सोचा कि किसी वजह से गिरफ्तार करने आए थे। तो हमारे ऊपर वाले फ्लैट था, तो हम नीचे जाके दरवाज़ा खोल दिया। तो वो ऊपर आए थे। They all stood at attention all the way around the flat, everywhere. Opened the doors and pushed in. तो मैंने उनसे पूछा था कि आपके कोई वारंट है सर्च करने के लिए? तो कहने लगे वारंट तो आ ही जाएगा। मैंने कहा दिखा दें। तो उन्होंने कहा नहीं हमें इस वक्त कोई नहीं है। तो then the DIG or whatever he was, I don't remember, he came. तो उसने कहा था कि वो फैज साहब कहाँ है? तो फैज साहब निकले, वो ज़रा सा कुछ पहन के, शॉल पहन के आए थे। मार्च 9 था। तो ने पूछा था कि आपको ले जाने के लिए आए हैं। तो फैज़ ने पूछा था व्हाट फॉर, व्हाट आई डन? ही सेड आपको पता लग जाएगा।
All the pettinesses and jarrings have gone, and I love now for what I believe to be right and honest. It seems now that I shall have to cope with the expenses of the trial. I hope that you are well. The journey together to your fortress. We need the trip to laugh a little. There have been enough tears, as you say, and we have none left. Your book is now going into a second edition. It has gone very well indeed. Bless you, dearest heart. And when the President makes his announcement, my hand will be in yours, and I shall press it gently. Nothing else will matter. The rest is love and waiting, and the future and its dreams. And when I water the green shoots each morning, I do weep a little for the magic and beauty of it all. And then I don't have to weep for your lonely girls and separation, for father or for your mother, or for years lost and dreary work unending. Because tears which might have been shed in sadness have been shed for the joy of what we live for, whether for green shoots. The CID has described me as Faiz Ahmed Faiz, female.
She was not just a prolific writer and a vociferous activist, she was also a fierce believer in women's and children's rights. The woman behind Fairs was Alice. The person behind Alice was herself.
कब याद में तेरा साथ नहीं, कब हाथ में तेरा हाथ नहीं, कब याद में तेरा साथ नहीं, कब हाथ में तेरा हाथ नहीं.
I think your children will be among those without stigmas. They have never seen us cheating, being corrupt, or even lying.
अपनी रातों में अब हिज्र की कोई रात नहीं.
We are just waiting for you to return from across the darkness of separation. We shall have so much to make up, so much to remember, so much to forget.
Alice Fairs died on March 12, 2003, and has been laid to rest next to Fairs Ahmed Fairs in Model Town, Lahore, the city of the Lawrence Gardens she loved so much. Theirs was perhaps the most endearing love story of this era.
कब याद में तेरा साथ नहीं, कब हाथ में तेरा हाथ नहीं, सद शुक्र के अपनी रातों में अब हिज्र की कोई रात नहीं.
Assalamu alaikum. On behalf of Fairs Foundation Trust and this wonderful Karachi Literature Festival, I welcome you to our session, Over My Shoulder, Writings by Alice Fairs and Dear Heart to Fairs in Prison. Over My Shoulder is a collection of writings by Alice Fairs that were originally published in She, as well as a selection of her poetry. And Dear Heart to Fairs in Prison, as the title itself states, are letters that she wrote to Fairs Ahmed Fairs when he was in prison. Both books were first published more than 25 years ago, and these are the new editions that have been re-edited and generally, as Alice Fairs might herself put it, tarted up for the new century. To help with the session, I have here two people who I think particularly for Karachi dwellers hardly need an introduction. Marjorie Hussain, art critic, curator, painter, author. Sania Said, I think the most acclaimed television and theatre actor of her generation. Thank you both. My claim to fame is a little more, I don't know if I'm making up a word here, nepotistic in nature. Alice Fairs was my grandmother. And for those who've already read Over My Shoulder, if you remember a character who made an occasional appearance called Long Platt, sometimes also referred to as Margaret, that was me. So we'll begin with Marjorie, and it's sort of a general question, firstly to do with Over My Shoulder. Now, Over My Shoulder is not what we'd, I think, strictly define as an autobiography, though it has some of those elements. So my question really is, how do we classify it, if we were to, and who is it for? Who's the reader, and why are they reading this book?
Well, I can only say that reading this book, it was like Mrs. Alice Fairs was talking to me. Mm-hmm. It was like we were having a conversation, and she was describing to me exactly what had happened, the awful experiences she'd had, and she made a light of things. I mean, she didn't dwell upon the agony, but she looked for little celebrations in between, you know. So I would say for anyone who likes to read, the book is for them. And I mean, the story is harrowing and yet full of optimism. You know, what she went through is just unbelievable. And the system that was so shocking, that put her and the children through so much pain, it's hard to believe now that it could exist. But she came through it with her absolute usual dignity, humor, and thinking of other people. So I think I would not categorize it. It's something very unusual. I have never read a book that I have been more into or really felt that I was, you know, speaking to the author. And I can only compare it to Henry Miller's Rosy Crucifixion, when at the end he says, life is one long rosy crucifixion. That's what I got this feeling from Alice too.
And do you think that it also gives perhaps younger readers an insight into a Pakistan that was?
Well, I think it's fascinating. Of course, it's history. Absolutely. I mean, the way Alice came to Lahore and the way she adapted to the customs, the costumes, and learnt the language. I mean, it is history. It's a law that really doesn't exist now. And I think anyone who's interested in the history of Pakistan would get a lot out of this book. So certainly I think it would appeal to many people.
Sanya, your part is up. Sanya will read to us a piece from Over My Shoulder.
Srinagar, October 1941. This year, it would be marriage in the valley of Kashmir. Whatever visits had been made before, a year before, 2 years before, would recede. It was certain that Faiz and I would live together as man and wife, no matter how hard the going might be, no matter how short funds might be, no matter what the war might bring, victory or defeat. We had made up our minds. It had taken a long time, hours of debate, the pros and cons of a mixed marriage, the attempts at calculating a budget, 150 rupees a month split up into pieces for a very extended family. He had told me more or less who was who. This widowed half-sister, this orphaned nephew, this niece suffering from TB, this sister, no matter what she might do, she must be pacified at all times. She was domineering, neurotic, childless, always ready for a family quarrel. Venerable uncles, village cousins, near, distant, in-between relations, 2 brothers, not counting the poor retarded child who needed constant attention and care. And there was Faiz's mother. It was all so formidable. And then there was the language. Not only Urdu, but also Persian and Punjabi. 3 languages operated in this strange extended family. I remember an evening in Srinagar, a few days before my marriage, waiting for the sun to set, a fading October afternoon merging into evening, waiting for night to take over. Louder? Okay. I remember that a sort of heart sickness almost stopped the breath in my throat. A longing, a nostalgia sharpened by fear. I was leaving behind so much. Would the future compensate me? There had been so much opposition to our marriage, so many warnings given, so many forebodings held out, that one wondered time and time again whether it would work or not. And if not, how would one call retreat? We had so much in common, and yet we had not tested our differences. We had not been called upon to. That was to come. The love I bore Faiz and that which he bore me, and yet had yet to be opened up to time, to a very specific environment, to concrete conditions, which so far had been but speculation, which so far had been lumped together in an uncertain future. I watched the night shadows gather on Dal Lake. During the past few days, the winter snows had crept down almost imperceptibly. The far-off mountains, blood red in the setting sun of evening and rose-tinted at dawn. I had stood and watched them in all their moods and beauty. There was no turning back now. I could find no solace in their beauty. Would this country accept me? Could I live in this world of contrasts, poverty and riches, in the heat and dust of Punjab's summer, in the bitter cold of its winter, a poor man's wife? I could find no answer. Only the passing years would reveal it. At last, the marriage party arrived, tired and dusty, and a small, pathetic one it was. Inayat, a younger brother whom I grew to love, Naeem, a communist worker, and the groom. The first thing Faiz did was to show me the wedding ring. I slipped it on, a perfect fit. "How did you know?" I asked. He slipped it onto his own finger. Another perfect fit. "The eternity ring," I said. Faiz laughed. So I dressed up as a bride in that gorgeous gold thread maroon sari that he had bought in Simla that summer. Dr. Tasir, my brother-in-law, was principal of the SP College in Srinagar, and the Rani's summer palace on a hillside had been placed at his disposal until such time as a house might be found for him. The ladies, who were few, sat together in a small royal anteroom. The most excited amongst us was Selma, my small niece. "You're going to be married?" "Yes." "Will you make babies then?" "Perhaps." "Please do. I want someone to play with." It all seemed so make-believe, remote from real life. A Rani's palace above the Dal Lake, a sari of spun gold thread, Tasir's mother, beautiful, calm, smiling to herself, smoking her hookah, Rafi Pir's sister, her daughters, waiting, whispering. What kind of marriage is it? No procession, no band. Shh. The door opens and Sheikh Abdullah stands in the doorway, tall, so imposing. He crosses the room in measured tread. He bows low in greeting to Tasir's mother. She lowers her head in salutation. He bends over me and takes my hand in his, and then speaks, gently in Urdu, then in English, perhaps too in Kashmiri. Of this I am a little unsure. He asks me, in the Muslim traditional manner, to give my consent. I do so. The contract is made. An Islamic marriage is a contract. The contract made our marriage monogamous, and Faiz had delegated his right of divorce to me. This contract was patterned on the contract between my sister and Dr. Tasir, written up by Sir Muhammad Iqbal.
And now coming to Dear Heart, to Faiz in Prison. Fairs's letters to Alice that he wrote to her while he was incarcerated from 1951 to 55 as a political prisoner were first published in his lifetime in an Urdu translation. But recently we published them in the original English as a book called Two Loves. Dear Heart is Alice's side of the story. Now, in literature, letters are something that we've seen for the longest time. Hemingway, Shaw, Georgia O'Keeffe, etc. Why are we so interested in the personal life in this fashion? Again, it's not another form of writing like memoirs or an autobiography. It's something very, very personal. What do we find in the letters that we perhaps don't find in other writings?
Well, I think with Mrs. Alice Fairs' letters, what we find is the unfolding of a story, the details, the way she writes to her husband, minimizing their problems and celebrating happy little things that happen with the children. She has a way of, and I think the way she wrote to Faiz Ahmed Faisab kept him going, because, he was incarcerated. Stealing those years from their lives, the children were very small. It was, I think, almost 5 years before he was released and came back to the family, and the children grew up in that time with Alice keeping them going, literally keeping them going. She was the breadwinner. And she's so interesting the way she tells how she sold the family car to hire a lawyer when this long case that took a year was going on and nothing came out of it. And she bought a bicycle, and she used to cycle to work a long way to the paper she worked for, and cycle back in the heat of summer. And she wrote to him that what kept me going was the thought of the children waiting. They'd be waiting for me, and when I came in sight, they'd give a cheer. And it was a happy thing. And she never complained, really. She just explained the difficulties and how she got round them. And I think that it is really, she's a role model for all of us, and I felt so ashamed of the things I complain about when I read that book and saw how she overcame the problems, and she retained her nobility and her dignity throughout. So I think that really she's a role model, and that comes out in the letters, what she suffered and how she overcame it, and how she found things to be happy about, and how she took the children to, how she made the children happy. She wrote to her husband that we're going to the park and we're going to have ice cream, and little things that were really sort of happy family. And I think that must have made the greatest difference to Mr. Faiz Ahmed Faiz in prison.
There is also the notion, of course, of the personal is political. Do you think we find something political in her personal letters?
Well, I think the fact that she believed that everyone was equal, if one wants to call it political, that was her belief. Mm-hmm. And that's the way she wrote, whether she was, she gave as much care to the people who worked for her, or the people that, were out, sort of had no homes to live in. She cared about them, and she did what she could whenever she had the chance. So if that is political, if that's a political statement, then certainly she believed that all men were equal and gave everyone the same respect.
Okay, now to end with, Sanya, can we have one of the letters? For some.
It is just one letter, Meera, so I think we're running out of time. This was written on May 28, 1954. Like you, I think that in this hot weather, letters do not make one feel warm, but cool. I am so relieved to read the cheerful note between the lines. Sometimes a cold hand clutches my heart. Like this morning at 5:30 a.m. when I took my tea in our room, opened the window and sat in the chair gazing at the tops of the trees towards the radio station. I thought of you and wondered whether you too were awake, when suddenly I heard a small voice asking, "Mummy, what are you doing here?" And there was Chimi, soon followed by Mizu. I told them I was thinking of you, and two small heads dropped in my lap. I wonder if you got our message across the ether. A few days ago, Ismat celebrated her daughter's birthday, and what a grand show it was. Even the elephant from the zoo had been hired. There were bears, monkeys, conjurers, and children galore. A grand fireworks display, presents hanging from trees, fountains playing, and of course, Ifti was missing. Tahira Mazhar was blue because Mazhar had been away for a week, and she said, "God, when I think of you, Alice," I said, "Don't. I never do." Yesterday, I gave my blood at the Mayo Hospital for a very urgent case. The result was Nana's cartoon. There was a poor Nepalese student, desperately ill. I went back to the Pakistan Times office to ask for help. No one responded. I then asked the artist Butt, a huge weightlifter, and even he refused, saying, "I may look strong, but actually I'm not." So back I went in the heat and lay down and gave my blood. I phoned the girls and told them I would be late and why. And when I eventually got back, all the heads were hanging anxiously over the veranda wall. I rang my cycle bell and waved. They almost put me to bed again. But I said all was well. So much for weightlifters and the like. The heat is intolerable. We sprinkle the compound with water, and the nights are still cool. Trials and tribulations of the rising cost of living. Toothpaste at rupees 3.12 a tube, and a packet of Lux costs rupees 4. We have made a tin of tooth powder last 2 months. Most people are going without. Our group, for your release, has sent out 2,000 Eid cards. You will get one too. Keep well, dear heart, and let us fix our eyes beyond the horizon until these months have passed.
Thank you, Sania Said, and thank you, Marjorie Hussain, for your assistance, your wonderful assistance. Thank you all for being here. Copies of the books are available at the festival, and if you can catch them, Salima Hashmi and Muniza Hashmi, Chimi and Mizu are around, and I think they'd be happy to sign the copies of the books. Thank you all very, very much.